All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video as we look at the prospects that our good friend Greg Cosell is on record as being a big fan of. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Coming up next, first, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. We're also brought to you by Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. They're at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove, California, along the Monterey Peninsula. Thanks to Anthony Catania. He's at 831-521-5264. And this video is also brought to you by Claw Daddy Arcades. Follow them on Instagram at claw_daddy_arcades and find an arcade location near you. And the video is also sponsored by LearnKeys Upskill Academy, an online learning platform designed to get you job ready in 6 months or less, whether you're interested in any number of fields: IT, cybersecurity, marketing, could be another field. They offer over 30 different certification programs to help you take that next step in your professional career. They've been in business for 37 years. They've over 200,000 students that they've worked with. Over 100 students are placed in good paying jobs every month. And thanks to LearnKey Upskill Academy for sponsoring the Krug Show. There are links in the description to all of our sponsors, and thanks to all of them for being proud sponsors of the Krug Show. All right, let's talk a little bit about Greg Cosell from NFL Films, who's one of our favorites. And Greg, used to come on with Gary and I. We would do the regular Niners segment and talk a little bit about, who the Niners, he thought of the Niners. And Greg's whole thing is he watches the film. He rolls that film back and forth. And he has a lot of great opinions this time of the year on the draft prospects, because when the season's over, he's got time to kind of delve into the draft prospects and knows an awful lot about what he's looking at. So we're going to go through. I saw a number of interviews that he did on the Ross Tucker podcast, as well as different interviews that he did around the country with different radio stations. And I just watched them all on YouTube over the last day. And I'm going to give you kind of like the creme de la creme. I mean, who he basically likes at some key position groups. We'll start with wide receivers. Greg says that there are more wide receivers taken in every draft than any other position, and that cornerback is the second most drafted position of any position in the draft. He said there are more than 30 wide receivers taken in almost every single draft. So it's a position that NFL teams are definitely wanting to replenish. And he talked about the receivers that he likes. And the first guy that he talked about was Matthew Golden, the Texas wide receiver who ran 4.29 at the combine. And Greg's first comment was, I don't really think that he plays to that speed. He doesn't really play to the 4.9 timing, but he's a good route runner. He's really, really smart. He's a really good route runner. He's got great quickness. He's got great route running refinement. He says he understands pace and tempo and route running, and yet he can get vertical. Even though he doesn't necessarily play to the 4.29 timing, he still has a vertical elements to his game, and he just really likes Golden. And you could see that, you could see that Greg thinks he's very advanced for a receiver, and he probably is. Good route runner. Good feel for route running. The quickness in and out of the breaks is real clear. He understands the difference in pace and tempo in separating from coverage, and he's an advanced route runner. So Greg really liked Matthew Golden. The other guy that he said he really liked was Teteroa McMillan. He's big, he's long, he's smooth. He's a smooth mover. He's a huge receiver that has a gigantic catch radius. He kind of called him a possession receiver, but he feels like he's good after the catch as well. Talking a little bit about Teteroa McMillan. I thought it was really apparent, though, when Greg was talking about these wide receivers, that he really lit up when he started talking about Luther Burden, the wide receiver from Missouri. And the first thing he said is Luther Burden is sudden, he's explosive, and he's dynamic. He's a 3-level receiver who can make plays down the field. Greg says Missouri used Burden a lot in motion this year, And Greg's like, hey, man, this guy can run by people. He can take the top off of defense. He can engage the safety and run right by. So you could see that there's a vertical element to Luther Burden's game that Greg Cosell likes quite a bit. Then he talked a little bit about Egbuka from Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. And, it's interesting. He's like, he played primarily out of the slot at Ohio State, but Greg's like, man, this guy's physical. He's a good route runner. He's got really good footwork. He's gonna be good right away because he's very, very polished. He's like, he's not an explosive player, even though he did run sub 4.5, but he's physical and he's fluid. And he's a guy that he said he looked veteran. He looked like a 10-year pro. Really good footwork, will likely be able to step in and contribute right away. And he compared him to Tyler Boyd. He said he reminds him kind of a young Tyler Boyd, the longtime Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver. So Egbuka is an interesting name, especially for a team like the 49ers, who, if obviously don't have Debo. We don't know about the status of Aiyuk, other than it's likely if he's on the team, he's probably going to miss at least half the year. Probably it sounds like he'll be out until November. So do the Niners need a receiver? Well, they probably do, but they also need a receiver that can step in and play right away and contribute right away. And that's where Egbuka might be on their list. I can't imagine they would draft him at 11, but maybe at 43, maybe in round 2. I could see Egbuka being on the 49ers list just because he is polished, just because he is ready to play. He's, Greg says he looks like a 10-year pro guy, because he's very polished in and out of his breaks, and he's just under control, and he doesn't have explosive ability, but his route running is really, really good. He's fluid, he's physical, and the footwork is exceptional. So that's a guy to watch. Another receiver that Greg really loves is Jack Betch from TCU. He says, I love this kid. The guy really knows how to run routes. He knows how to set up DBs. He's got run after the catch ability. His hands are really, really elite. He's got size and hands and physicality. And, he's a volume wide receiver, and he thinks he can be a volume wide receiver at the next level. So that's interesting. Betch is interesting. He played next to Savion Williams there at TCU in Dallas. And he had an amazing postseason. Of course, his brother tragically was killed in the January 1st terrorist attack in New Orleans, where a guy drove into a crowd of people. His brother played at Princeton, I believe, and his brother lost his life. And so Betch has gone through this tragedy this spring. And then, of course, he was probably the hottest name in Mobile. And he caught a big pass at the end of that game. I mean, Jack Betch, he's not a burner, but man, you can see he's tough. He's got ball skills, and Greg loves him, thinks he's ready to contribute. They talked a little bit about Isaiah Bond, and Isaiah Bond's got a lot of speed. He talked about Tez Johnson, the Oregon receiver. He says he's really, really small. This guy tore up Penn State. Greg described him as a fun watch with great quickness, but he's not long, and he's only about 155 pounds. He's not a strong receiver. He's not a big receiver. He's a small, fun to watch gadget receiver who ran in the 4.5s. But, he did say that Tez was a fun watch. Greg also commented that he really liked the Iowa State receivers. He really likes Jaden Higgins. He says, I really like this kid. He moves effortlessly. And, for a big receiver, we're talking about a 6'5" receiver. And then he really likes Jalen Knoll as well. He talked about how Knoll at Iowa State played in the slot, and that he's 5'10", 195 pounds, but that there's a vertical element there, that he's got some run after the catch ability, that he's got, quick twitch, explosiveness, and he's got the ability to get vertical. And you can see that in the film when you watch Jalen Knoll. So that was Greg going over some of the receivers. I would say, based on the way he talked about these receivers, I think he has an appreciation for how polished Egbuka is from Ohio State. I think he's got an appreciation for the catch radius of Tetaroa McMillan, the man they call T-Mac. I think he really loves everything he sees about Matthew Golden. But the guy that he sounded most excited about was Luther Burden. He's like sudden, explosive, dynamic, 3-level dimension. He can run by you. He can take the top off. I mean, he really had a lot of a lot of great things to say about Luther Burden. And then he obviously loves Jack Betch, and then he loves Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. So I would say, his favorite receiver is probably Matthew Golden, but it sounded like Luther Burden was also one of Greg's favorite receivers. All right, that was on the wide receivers. Then the conversation moved to defensive ends, and he was asked about Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, and he's like, "Man, it's a strong group of edge rushers." The one thing about Shamar Stewart is he played at 280 plus pounds, but he weighed in at 267 at the combine, and he ran exceptionally fast. Greg describes him as a freakish athlete, but as a defensive end who doesn't know how to use his hands, and he's really unrefined. He says you can see his freakish athleticism and explosive traits in the film, but he really doesn't know how to set up linemen. He doesn't know how to use his hands. It sounds like Shamar Stewart's really, really raw as a pass rusher, which makes sense because he's big, strong, fast, and yet hardly ever sacked the quarterback. About James Pierce, the Tennessee kid, he's like, he looked small to me, but he had 17 sacks the last 2 years at Tennessee. He said he looked skinny, but he says he's a wide 9 defensive end, which is what the Niners run, is a wide 9. He's got some power. He's got tremendous speed. Greg says he looks better in space, and so he likes him in a wide 9 look defensively. So maybe the Niners will have interest. Pierce, some people feel, has some character concerns. Greg didn't talk about that because he doesn't know the players and doesn't talk about the players. Like, he's not claiming to know the players. He's just judging based on film. Greg did like Nick Scorton from A&M, the Purdue transfer. He said he was awesome at Purdue. And he said he looked really good. He says, I really like Scorton. He can set up offensive tackles. He's a refined pass rusher. He's got a plan. He led the Big Ten in sacks when he was at Purdue. He really likes Scorton's tape. And you can see, he likes him more than Stewart. He likes Scorton, and they, of course, both played at A&M on the same defensive line this last year. But Greg seemed to like Scorton a whole lot more than he liked Shamar Stewart. I thought that was interesting. Greg also had good things to say about Mikael Williams from Georgia. He said to him, man, he's powerful. He's athletic. He wasn't healthy last year. He said he's the most intriguing edge player because he's got tremendous upside. He's like, man, I've stood next to this guy. This guy's a man. 34.5-inch arms, really, really long arms. Mikael Williams physically is exactly what you're looking for. And Greg acknowledged as much. He also said he kind of liked Jordan Birch, the Oregon defensive end who's a South Carolina transfer, 5-star in high school. Described him as a multi-position player who's an ascending player at 6'4", 280 pounds. He wasn't very complimentary of JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State. He said, man, if you're drafting him as a pass rusher, I don't see it. He didn't really like Jack Sawyer from Ohio State. He's like, yeah, he's a temporary, you can play him, in a rotation, but he's not an every down defensive end. He's more of a pass rushing specialist that would come in on certain downs. So he wasn't a big fan of the Buckeye duo, who are a lot of people saying are going to go on day 2 of the draft. The defensive end that Greg liked the most, at least he sounded the most enthusiastic, was Landon Jackson from Arkansas. He says, I really like this kid. He's like, I've watched 2 years of film on this kid. He compared him to Max Crosby. He said that, the 10-9 broad jump really impressed the scouts because the broad jump tests your explosiveness, your hip explosion, and your how explosive you are as an athlete. And a 10-9 broad jump for a guy who's 6'6", 270 is pretty damn good. So Greg loved that number. He also loved the fact that he has 10-inch hands. He said Landon Jackson at 6'6", 270 is really long. He's got an idea of what he wants to do as a pass rusher. So Landon Jackson Greg sounded like he was more of a fan of Landon Jackson than Shamar Stewart or James Pierce. He did like Mikael Williams. He did like Scorton. And he liked Mike Green. He was asked about Mike Green from Marshall, and he said he really likes him. He says he's got a ton of moves. He's got a great elite spin move. So he liked the pass rushing ability of Mikael Williams. He liked the moves of Mike Green. He likes Scorton, and he really likes Landon Jackson. Not as much love for Shamar Stewart or James Pierce. Definitely no love for JT Tuamolo and Jack Sawyer. Then the conversation moved to defensive tackle. And it's interesting. The first guy they started talking about was Kenneth Grant, and he sounded really enthusiastic. He's like, man, this guy's big. He's light on his feet. He's 6'3", 330, but he's not a run defender. He could become a pass rusher as well. He's not solely a run defender, I should say. He's like, he's got pretty good athleticism. He's like, there's a lot there. And there's a lot of talent. There's no question. Kenneth Grant's an enormous talent. But Greg likes him. Greg likes him as a run defender, but he also thinks he's got upside as a power rusher. But then when the conversation went to Walter Nolan, he's like, this is the best defensive tackle in the class. And he said it with total conviction. He's like, Texas A&M transfer. This guy's Greg described Walter Nolan as a power three, he's a power three technique. So a three technique is a defensive tackle. And to describe him as a power three technique means that he's got both power and speed. He's got the speed to rush the passer as an interior player, but he also has tremendous power. He said he's really, really strong, really, really strong. He's really, really quick, and he plays low. So, man, that's really it. If you have a motor and you're strong and you're quick and you play the run well and you can rush the passer, you're the total package. And as far as Greg's concerned, he said Walter Nolan is the best defensive tackle in this class. And almost on that alone, I think if I were the Niners, I'd be interested in trading back from 11 a couple of spots at most, and then taking Walter Nolan. Draft Walter Nolan comfortably. Matt Miller had Walter Nolan falling to the 49ers at 43. Don't chance that. If you're going to trade down from 11 to between 15 and 20 and draft Walter Nolan there after you pick up a couple extra picks. I think that probably is the best game plan for how I would attack this draft. He also talked about Derek Harmon, and it's interesting. He's like, man, Derek Harmon, he's a 1 year player. He's still developing as a player. He was a rotation player at Michigan State. He said he's long. He's got good burst to the quarterback. He likes him as a pass rusher. Didn't like him as much as a run defender. And the PFF numbers kind of show that Harmon's really strong. He had 55 pressures, the most of any defensive tackle. But he also struggled against the run. And there were several metrics that kind of showed that Derek Harmon is struggling as a run defender. Another guy that he really, really liked, I would say, if he liked Walter Nolan the most, the guy that he liked the second most was Joshua Farmer from Florida State. He's like, man, this guy's a power player. He's like one of my favorite guys. He's 6'3", 305 pounds. He's got dominant short area quickness. He plays with really, really strong hands, and he's got ridiculously long arms. So, Farmer, who plays at 6'3", 305 with those long arms, probably even plays bigger. But he was one of his favorites, and I agree. I mean, to me, if the Niners went Walter Nolan in round 1 and came back with Joshua Farmer on day 2, either in late on round 2 or maybe early on round 3, I think that's the way I would play my hand as far as the defensive front. Go with a guy like Walter Nolan, who reminds me of Chris Jones. He can play end, he can play tackle, he can play anywhere along the line. You can literally move him anywhere. And then play him next to a guy like Farmer, who's also a really good pass rusher. And I think those two guys, Nolan and Farmer, could absolutely wreck shop on the 49er defense for Robert Saleh for the next 5 or 6 years. For Tyleik Williams, who had an injury at the Ohio State Pro Day, he's like, man, he's quick off the ball. He's strong. He's got heavy hands. He definitely seemed to like Tyleik Williams a little bit. Alfred Collins from Texas, he's like, you could see, the guys who were asking the questions, I think Tucker, maybe somebody else might have asked about Alfred Collins. He's 6'6", 332. And Greg's like, man, his highlight reel plays are awesome. And he's got a bunch of highlight reel plays. But if you watch him every snap, you'll see with Alfred Collins is he comes out of his stance and he immediately plays high. And he loses leverage. And he loses all that strength because he plays high and it's a leverage game. So he doesn't like Alfred Collins because he doesn't play with leverage. You could see he wasn't a big fan of Derek Harmon because he was only a 1 year player. He likes Kenneth Grant, but he loves Walter Nolan and Joshua Farmer. And if there was another guy that he loved, I'd say it's probably Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee. Greg said he liked him a lot. He's 6'2", 295 pounds. He's very athletic. Um, the one thing that Greg commented about Omar Norman Lott is that he's really strong against the run, but he also can bend and rush the passer. And I think we saw some snaps where Omar Norman Lott was doing exactly that. The interesting thing about Omar Norman Lott is Tennessee plays their defensive lineman in such a rotation that he didn't play that much. And there's still some development there because he is pretty raw because they rotate their defensive linemen so frequently that he didn't play as many snaps, and it starts to impact the production. But it was pretty clear of the defensive tackles that they discussed. Greg Cosell loves Walter Nolan, favorite defensive tackle in the class, loves Joshua Farmer, maybe to a slightly lesser degree, loves Omar Norman Lott. And then defensive end wise, I would say Greg loves Landon Jackson and stated that he really likes Mike Green and he likes Nick Scorton and Mikael Williams. Not as big a fan, I guess, of Shamar Stewart, James Pierce, Jordan Birch, J.T. Tuamolo, and Jack Sawyer. And then receiver wise, Greg sounds like he's a big fan of Luther Burden and, very much a fan of Jack Betch from TCU, of the Iowa State duo, Jalen Knoll and Jaden Higgins. And he likes the polish of Emeka Egbuka. So there you go. Those were the three positions that I really saw him break down. Wide receivers, edge rushers, and defensive tackles. I'll look for more, but that's what I saw. And, basically that's who Greg likes. And, Greg is really, really sharp. He watches the film and he's got a good track record. I mean, I've been, friends of his for a long time, and the guys that he likes usually perform. I mean, nobody's perfect. Sometimes everybody's got a miss there. But, man, if he says Walter Nolan's the best defensive tackle, that's good enough for me. So thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. And thanks to our sponsors this month, our spring training sponsors, Claw Daddy Arcades. Follow them on Instagram at claw_daddy_arcades for a location near you. And this video is sponsored by LearnKeys Upskill Academy. The links are in the description below. Thanks to all of them for being proud sponsors of the Krug Show. And thanks to you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.